Tuesday morning, November 18th, 2025, I sat in the intake corridor and counted ceiling tiles. There were 12 across the ceiling from where I sat to the observation room door, then another 9 along the length of the corridor before it turned toward the medical wing. I counted them twice because the first time Clyde kept tapping his shoe against the floor. He wasn't doing it loud, just enough to make me lose count. "You're on 12 again," he said. "I know. You've been on 12 for a while." I looked over at him. Clyde was picking at the tape covering his IV port. He'd already pulled one corner loose and was working at it with the nail of his thumb. The tape was white and cloudy from being handled. "Leave it alone," I said. "It's itching." "Then scratch next to it." He looked at me like that was a stupid answer, which it probably was. Then he went back to the tape. We'd been doing morning intake for 2 years. They took 7 students into the observation room one at a time, checked our vitals, asked the same questions, and wrote down whatever they thought mattered. There wasn't much to it. Temperature, pulse, blood pressure, a few questions about sleep and headaches. Sometimes they asked about our abilities. Afterward, they sent us back to class or the dorms, depending on the day. That night, every dorm door would lock from the outside, same as always. The institute had a lot of rules like that. Most of them didn't need signs because we'd learned them early. Audrey sat 2 chairs down from me with her arms crossed. Tyler was leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Kate had one foot tucked underneath her, and Stephanie kept looking at the observation room door. Bailey sat closest to it. She was reading the corner of a paper cup. There wasn't anything on it, as far as I could tell. She'd been turning it around in her hands for a few minutes anyway. Nobody talked much during intake. There wasn't much point. The corridor had white walls and plastic chairs bolted together in rows. The lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled like disinfectant and the faint rubber smell from the floor. Outside the institute, there was one gravel road with a gate at the end of it. The road ran 60 miles before it reached the nearest town. We didn't have cell service. The men in gray uniforms watched the gate and never talked to us unless they had to. So when they told us to wait, we waited. Ethan came through the door from the staff hall carrying his clipboard. He wore his white coat and had the blue keycard clipped near his pocket. He didn't look tired. Ethan never looked tired. The rest of us could sit under those lights for half an hour and start looking sick, but he always looked like he'd just walked out of a clean room. He stopped in front of Bailey. "Bailey," he said, "you're next." She looked up at him. "Is this the usual check?" "Yes." "How long will it take?" "It's the usual check." Bailey glanced at the rest of us. Nobody said anything. She put the cup down and stood. Ethan opened the observation room door. "Wait here," he said. Bailey went inside and Ethan followed her. The door swung shut with a soft click. Clyde pulled at his tape again. "Few minutes," he said. "You heard him?" "Yeah, I heard him." The second ceiling light flickered once and came back on. I counted the tiles again, starting from the corner nearest the observation room. 12 across, 9 down the hall. There was a brown mark over the 7th tile where something had leaked through the ceiling years ago. They'd painted around it instead of fixing it. I was looking at that mark when I saw the top of Ethan's clipboard through the narrow glass window in the door. He'd written something there. Not Bailey's name, not the date, not the usual check marks. Continuity. The word was written in black ink across the top of the page. The letters were neat and narrow. I could see them upside down from where I sat. I stopped counting. Ethan had asked me about memory gaps twice that week. The first time was in the intake room on Monday. The second time had been yesterday, after dinner, when he found me alone near the laundry hall. Had using my ability caused any missing time, he'd asked. Had I noticed anything I couldn't account for? I told him no both times. That wasn't true. I didn't know how much time was missing. That was the problem. Sometimes I'd use my ability, and afterward there would be a blank place where something should have been. Not a whole day. usually less than that. A few seconds, maybe a minute. I kept track when I could. I didn't tell Ethan. The corridor stayed quiet. The lights hummed. Clyde's thumb scraped at the edge of the tape. At some point, Tyler whispered, "How long's it been?" Nobody answered him. "It feels like a while," he said. "Don't start," Kate told him. "I'm not starting anything. You are if you keep asking." Stephanie looked toward the observation room door. "Maybe Bailey's having trouble with the machine." "They don't need 40 minutes to check a pulse," Audrey said. That was when I looked at the clock over the staff door. 40 minutes had passed. The clock had a second hand that moved in small jerks. I watched it drag itself from one mark to the next. There wasn't any sound from the observation room. No voices, no equipment beeping, nothing. Ethan's clipboard was gone from the window. Clyde stopped picking at the tape. Then the observation room door moved. It didn't open. The whole thing bulged outward at the hinges like something heavy had leaned against it from the other side. The plastic chairs creaked as everybody stood up. A smell rolled through the corridor. It was sweet at first. Rotten sweet. Like fruit left in a hot room, except there was something wet underneath it. Something sour and thick that caught in the back of my throat. "What is that?" Tyler said. Ethan screamed. It was one sound, high and rough and cut off so fast it didn't seem possible that it had come from a grown man. The door bulged again. The frame cracked. "Back up," I said. Nobody moved. The wood split along the side where the hinges were bolted. A dark line opened from the floor almost to the window. It spread slowly for half a second. Then the whole door tore inward. The observation room was full. The vitals cart lay overturned on its side. The monitor was still attached to the wall and its screen flashed green lines over nothing. Something dark and wet filled the room from the floor to the ceiling. It pressed against the walls in thick folds and shifted without making any sound I could understand. Bailey was gone. I saw one of her shoes near the bottom of the room. It was still attached to her foot. The foot moved once as the gray substance folded over it. The foot moved once more and then the door slammed shut. There was a click from the lock above us. Not the soft click the observation room door had made before. This one was louder, a metal bolt sliding into place. The corridor doors locked automatically when something went wrong. They'd told us that during intake, though nobody had ever explained what counted as wrong. Fire, security breach, a student getting too close to a staff door, things like that. I tried the handle anyway. It didn't move. "Jimmy," Tyler said. "I know." The gray substance pushed through the broken doorway. It didn't spill like water. It came out in thick ropes that dragged themselves over the floor and climbed the walls. Each rope ended in a human eye. There were dozens of them. They had no lids, nothing to cover them or keep the dust out. They blinked at different times, some fast and some slow. One eye blinked sideways. Another rolled around in its socket like it was trying to see behind itself. I didn't know where to look. "Back up," I said. Audrey grabbed the nearest chair and threw it. She didn't hesitate. Audrey never did when there was something in front of her that needed moving. The chair hit the gray mass and sank into it. The tendrils wrapped around the legs and pulled it down. The plastic softened. It turned clear in spots and then collapsed in on itself. By the time the mass released it, there wasn't a chair anymore, just a dark smear on the floor. "Run," Audrey said. That got everybody moving. The far door was at the end of the corridor past the turn toward the medical wing. We'd used it plenty of times. Staff opened it with their cards and students went through when they were being taken to appointments or testing. It had a metal push bar and a little window at eye level. I reached it first and shoved the bar down. Nothing happened. I pushed harder. The door stayed shut. "Locked," I said. "I can see that," Kate said. The gray tendrils were coming faster now. They slapped against the floor and pulled themselves forward. The eyes on the ends watched us while they moved. I could hear a wet, dragging sound underneath the alarms, though I don't remember the alarms starting. Maybe they hadn't. Maybe that was just the thing making noise. Tyler hit the door with his shoulder. "Come on," he said. "Come on." "It won't open." "Then hit it again." He did. The metal shook, but the lock held. I looked back down the corridor. The mass had filled most of the space between us and the observation room. It was wider than the doorway now. Tendrils reached along both walls and curled around the ceiling lights. Clyde was standing beside the fire cabinet. The cabinet was a red metal box bolted to the wall. It held a fire extinguisher, a hose, and a steel door that had probably never been opened by anyone who actually needed it. Clyde put both hands against the side of it. "Move," he said. "What are you doing?" "Move." We moved. Clyde pulled once. Nothing happened. He set his feet and pushed again. His shoes slid on the floor. "One," he muttered. The cabinet tore loose from the wall. The bolts came out with pieces of plaster around them. Clyde shoved the whole thing across the corridor. It scraped loud enough to hurt my ears and tipped onto its side just as the tendrils reached it. The gray mass folded over the cabinet. For a second it stopped. Clyde stayed bent over with his hands on his knees. He'd spent more strength than he wanted the staff to know about. He usually hid that part. He'd use his ability and then stand there acting like nothing had happened, even when his hands shook. The tendrils shoved against the cabinet. 1 second, 2. On the third, the steel door buckled inward and the mass started pushing it along the floor. Clyde fell against the wall. "I'm fine," he said. "You don't look fine." "I'm just out of room." Audrey grabbed his arm and pulled him upright. "Listen, we move now." The service door beside the medical wing was closer than the far exit. It had a narrow glass window and a sign that read, "Staff only." That sign had never stopped anyone during an emergency, though I guess most emergencies didn't involve a hallway full of eyes. I got to the door and pulled the handle. It opened a few inches before catching on something. "Help me." Clyde came over and put his shoulder against it. Audrey joined him. Tyler, Kate, and Stephanie crowded behind us. "Push," I said. We pushed. The door opened far enough for us to slip through. The medical wing smelled like alcohol and hot plastic. There were examination rooms on one side and a long dark hall on the other. The lights over the floor came on in sections as we entered. Behind us, the tendrils punched through the drywall. The wall split open with a sound like a tree breaking. Gray ropes came through the hole and spread over the service door. The nearest ceiling light flickered and went dark. Then the next one went out. "Keep moving," I said. We ran across the medical wing floor. Clyde was limping now, but he didn't complain. Audrey stayed beside him and kept one hand near his back without actually touching him. She knew better than to make a thing out of helping. Tyler was behind me with Stephanie. Kate was a few steps ahead, already looking for another door. The floor was smooth and white. Too smooth. Shoes slipped on it when people were in a hurry. I knew that because I'd slipped there before during a morning medical check. It wasn't a dangerous floor under normal circumstances. Tyler's foot went out from under him. He hit the floor hard and grabbed at the air. Stephanie reached back for him. "Tyler!" He caught her wrist, the gray tendril wrapped around his ankle. 1 second he was on the floor holding Stephanie. The next his leg jerked straight and he started sliding backward. "Pull me back," he yelled. Stephanie grabbed both his hands. "I have you!" The tendril tightened around his ankle. Its eye blinked once. The skin around it stretched as Tyler kicked. Clyde turned and pushed. The tendril jumped sideways, but it didn't let go. Clyde made a noise through his teeth and pressed harder. His face went pale. "Go," he said. Tyler's fingers slipped against Stephanie's. "Stay together," he said. "Okay? Stay together." The gray mass pulled him toward the service door. His shoulder struck the floor. Stephanie held on until her knees slid out from under her. Please don't leave me here." Audrey grabbed Stephanie around the waist and pulled her away. Tyler's hand came free. Clyde pushed again. The tendril moved just enough for Tyler to twist around and reach toward us. Then 3 more ropes came over the floor. They covered his legs first. His chest disappeared under the gray. His hand stayed out for another second, fingers opening and closing. Then it was gone. Stephanie made a sound that didn't seem like a word. Audrey dragged her backward while the mass folded over the place where Tyler had been. We ran. The medical corridor turned left ahead of us. There was a medication room on the near side with a keypad lock. Kate reached it and started hitting the buttons. "That door is closer," she said. "It's locked." "I know." The lights behind us went dark one by one. The gray filled the hall where we'd been standing. Its tendrils climbed the walls and spread across the ceiling. Eyes blinked above us. "Kate," I said, "the archive passage." "No, listen. This room has a lock. It won't open." "I can open it." She hit the keypad again. Stephanie joined her and pulled at the handle. "Wait," Stephanie said. "We need everyone." "We don't have time," Kate said. The mass divided around the doorway. It didn't just come straight at them. The tendrils moved along both sides of the door and reached around it like fingers closing over a box. Kate kept pressing the lock. "Come on," she said. "Come on." Stephanie pulled the handle until the metal bent. "I can't open it." The gray ropes caught Kate first. They wrapped around her waist and pulled her away from the keypad. She kicked at them and laughed once without any humor in it. "No, listen." The rest of the words disappeared under the wet gray mass. Stephanie held the door with both hands. Her eyes found mine across the corridor. "Jimmy." I took one step toward her. Audrey caught my coat. "No." The tendrils climbed over Stephanie's shoulders. She kept pulling at the locked door even as they dragged her sideways into the dark medical corridor. "Please." Then the mass closed over her too. Clyde, Audrey, and I ran for the archive passage. We reached the records archive door as the tendrils struck the walls behind us. Audrey got the archive door open far enough for us to squeeze through. She held it with both hands while Clyde came in behind me. The tendrils were already scraping across the floor outside the medical ward. They made a dry sound against the metal threshold, though they were dripping wet. "Keep moving," Audrey said. There wasn't much room to move in the archive. Steel shelves filled most of it from floor to ceiling. Filing cabinets sat in rows between them, some of them leaning forward like they were tired of standing. The only light came from a fluorescent fixture near the middle of the room. It hummed and flickered without ever getting fully bright. Clyde grabbed the nearest cabinet by the side. "Back up," he said. Audrey pulled the door shut. I took hold of the handle and helped her drag it closed while Clyde set his feet. He'd already used his ability once in the corridor and it had left him pale and unsteady, but he didn't say anything about that. He pushed. The cabinet ripped free and slammed into the archive door. The impact shook dust down from the ceiling. Clyde pushed again and drove it lower until the bottom edge wedged beneath the handle. The tendrils struck the other side. The door jumped in its frame. The cabinet rattled. One of the filing drawers slid open a few inches and then rolled shut again. "That hold?" I asked. "For now," Clyde said. He put his hands on his knees. His breathing was rough. There was a red mark across his forehead from where he'd hit the wall down the corridor. "I'm fine." I didn't ask. "Still fine." Audrey was already moving between the shelves. "Bailey's file." The archive smelled like dust, old paper, and the hot electrical smell from the light overhead. Records were packed into gray folders with names typed on narrow labels. Intake dates, medical checks, ability reports. Every part of our lives reduced to paper and put somewhere nobody was supposed to find it. Audrey dragged her fingers along the labels as she went. "Here," she said. She pulled out a thick folder and looked at the name. Then she looked at me. Bailey. I know. The folder had been used a lot. The edges were soft and bent. Somebody had opened it enough times to wear a dark thumbprint into the paper. Audrey set it on top of a filing cabinet and started going through the contents. Clyde stayed by the door. He had one hand pressed against the cabinet like he could feel the thing outside through the steel. "What are you looking for?" I asked. "Anything that tells us where the exits are. The archive has a door. That one goes back into the medical wing." I noticed. She ignored me and kept turning pages. There were charts and checklists. Most of them had Bailey's name at the top, followed by numbers I didn't understand and notes written in black ink. Some pages had red lines through whole sections. Then Audrey stopped. She pulled out a stapled document. The first page had a dark stamp across it. Asset reclamation. The letters were large and uneven, like somebody had pressed the stamp down too hard. Underneath it was a photograph of the gray mass inside a steel tank. Tubes ran into the sides of the tank. There were lights mounted above it and a drain in the floor beneath the glass. The thing in the photograph had the same folds and ropes as the thing outside, the same eyes. I could see them even in the grainy picture. Dozens of them pressed against the inside of the tank and looked toward whoever had taken the photograph. Beneath the picture was a label. Subject 0. I leaned closer. The report didn't call Bailey a patient. It called her an asset. So did the other pages. They had categories for useful, unstable, inactive, and reclamation pending. There were places for ability response and memory continuity. There wasn't a place for frightened or hurt or dead. My eyes widened. "What?" she asked. I couldn't answer her yet. The filing cabinet at the back of the archive slid open. It wasn't the cabinet Clyde had moved. This one was against the far wall behind 2 rows of shelves. The top drawer came out first. It moved slowly, making a long metal squeal that went through the room. Clyde turned from the door. "Jimmy." The drawer stopped. Something dropped out of it. It hit the floor on its side and rolled against the bottom shelf. For a second, I thought it was a bundle of clothes. Then it moved. The girl pushed herself up on both hands. She was small enough that she could have fit inside the drawer with room left over. Her hair was tangled around her face. There was dried blood on her shirt, her arms, and one side of her cheek. Some of it looked old. Some of it looked like it had been wiped there with a dirty hand. Audrey took a step in her direction. "Don't." The girl backed into the shelf. Her eyes moved between us. "I'm Chloe," she whispered. Her voice was thin and scratchy. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. "Are you hurt?" Audrey asked. Chloe shook her head. Then she looked down at the blood on her clothes. "I don't know." The door shook again. The cabinet beneath the handle groaned. Chloe flinched and put both hands over her mouth. I crouched down so I wasn't standing over her. She watched me like she expected me to grab her. "The teacher lets it out," she said. "What?" I asked. Chloe looked at the report in Audrey's hands. Her face changed when she saw the picture. "Subject 0, she whispered. "The teacher lets Subject 0 out whenever the students stop being useful." Clyde stared at her. "What teacher?" Chloe shook her head hard. "Don't say his name." "No, don't." She pressed herself farther into the shelf. Her breathing got fast. "He can hear," she said. "Whenever I say his name, he can hear me." Audrey looked toward the door. "How long have you been hiding here?" Chloe didn't answer. She looked at the cabinet she'd fallen out of instead. "The staff didn't find me," she said. "They looked, but they didn't find me." There was a small cut above her eyebrow. It had dried dark against her skin. She was covered in blood, but she was still standing. I reached out my hand. Chloe watched it. "I won't hurt you," I said. I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. The Institute had put us in rooms with machines and asked us to use abilities until we couldn't remember what happened afterward. They had called us students because that sounded better than what we were. I wasn't sure what that made me now. Chloe put her hand in mine. Her fingers were cold. I lifted her carefully and carried her away from the shelves. She weighed almost nothing in my arms. Her arms went around my neck, but she didn't hold tight. She kept looking over my shoulder at the archive door. "Put her down?" Clyde asked. "No. I wasn't saying you should." Audrey pulled another page from Bailey's file. "Listen, there might be a way out through the lower levels." Chloe raised her head. "The vents," she said. "The staff always move students through the lower levels after intake." "Where?" I asked. She pointed toward the wall above us. A line of ventilation grates ran along the top of the archive, mostly hidden in shadow. They were too small for me to climb through, but they connected somewhere. "The students go down," Chloe said. "They don't come back the same." Audrey looked at the report again. "Can you get us outside?" I asked. "I don't know." She flipped through the pages faster. "There's a maintenance route here, but it's old." "Find the door." Clyde put his shoulder against the cabinet. The archive door flexed inward. The metal bent around the handle and then sprang back. "Jimmy," he said, "we don't have long." "I know." Audrey laid the report on top of the folder and folded both together. The pages stuck out unevenly. I took them from her. The archive door flexed again. Dust fell from the light. Outside, something dragged itself across the floor beyond the archive and scraped along the other side of the steel. I pushed Bailey's file and the asset reclamation report inside my jacket. The cabinet beneath the handle jumped off the floor when the archive door buckled. Clyde leaned into it, shoulder first. "Back up," he said. I took Chloe with me and moved between the shelves. Audrey had the report tucked under one arm and was looking toward the back of the room. There was another door somewhere, a maintenance hatch or a service passage. The archive was old enough that there had to be one. Buildings like this always had places for pipes and wires and people who weren't supposed to be seen. I just had to find it before the thing came through the door. Something scraped inside the ceiling. We all looked up. The vent grate above us shook once. Dust fell through the slots. Then a gray tendril dropped out of it and hung there, almost touching the floor. There was an eye at the end. It looked around the room without moving its head because it didn't have a head. The eye rolled toward me and stopped. Chloe made a small noise against my shoulder. "Don't look at it," I said. That wasn't useful advice. The thing was hanging in the middle of the room and there wasn't anywhere else to look. It pulled itself back up a few inches. Then it struck the nearest filing cabinet. The cabinet tipped over with a loud metal crash. Drawers flew open and folders spilled across the floor. Another shelf rocked behind it. I started moving, but Chloe was in my arms, and the shelves left little room. "Jimmy!" Audrey yelled. The shelf came down across my legs. I hit the floor on my side. Chloe rolled free and landed against the bottom shelf. The impact knocked the air out of me. Something sharp caught my shin and tore through my trousers. For a second, I didn't feel anything. Then the pain arrived. It was hot and deep. I looked down and saw the edge of a filing cabinet pressed into my leg. Blood ran around it and dripped onto the concrete. The cut was open far enough that I could see white bone underneath. I tried to pull my leg back. It didn't move. "Jimmy," Chloe said. "I'm here." I shoved at the cabinet with both hands. It didn't budge. The tendril above us slapped against another shelf and the whole row shook. Clyde came over and grabbed the cabinet. "Move your leg." "I can't." "Try." "I am trying." He hooked both hands under the edge and pulled. His arms shook from the effort. He'd already been pushing cabinets around since the corridor and he was running out of whatever he used to do that. I could see it in his face. "1, he muttered. The cabinet lifted a little. 2, I dragged my leg free. The pain got worse when it moved. I yelled once and bit down on the rest. Blood ran into my shoe. My foot didn't feel attached anymore. It was there, but it wasn't going to hold me up. Clyde let the cabinet fall. "Can you stand?" "No." "Great." The tendril hit the shelf above us. A whole stack of folders came down and buried the floor where my head had been. Chloe crawled out from beneath the lower shelf. Her hair was full of dust. Audrey was standing under the vent with one hand raised. "Listen," she said. "Get away from me." "What are you doing?" Clyde asked. "Sealing it." The gray material in the ceiling started spreading around the vent. Audrey's fingers tightened. The metal grate turned dark, then gray. Plaster hardened around it in thick ridges. Audrey could turn things to stone for a few seconds at a time. She'd done it to locks and pipes and once to the wheels of a cart during training. It always looked simple when she did it. Touch something. Focus. Let the change move through. It wasn't simple now. The ceiling above her cracked. Stone spread out from the vent and sealed the opening. The tendril thrashed inside the hole. Audrey's jaw tightened as she held her hand up. "Come on," she said. The metal stopped moving. For a second, the archive went quiet except for Clyde breathing and my blood dripping onto the floor. Then another tendril punched through the stone. It caught Audrey by the wrist. She screamed. The gray around its body hardened where it touched the ceiling, but the tendril was still wrapped around her arm. The stone started at her hand. It covered her fingers first and moved up past her wrist in branching lines. Audrey pulled back. "Get off me!" Clyde started toward her. "Don't touch me," she said. "Stay back." The stone reached her elbow. Her skin turned gray beneath the sleeve. The change moved faster after that, climbing her arm and spreading across her shoulder. Audrey's face had gone white. She was still trying to hold the ceiling shut with her other hand. "Audrey," I said, "get Chloe out. I can't walk." "Then crawl." The stone crossed her chest. Her scream broke into a rough choking sound. She kept her eyes on me while the gray covered her neck and jaw. Her raised hand stayed against the ceiling until the fingers hardened too. The tendril pulled her off the floor. Her legs kicked once. Then they turned gray too. The ceiling gave way around the vent. Stone cracked across the plaster and fell in chunks. The mass came through behind her, folding into the room over the tops of the shelves. Audrey was solid stone now. She stood with one arm raised and her other wrist caught in the tendril. Her face was still turned toward us. I could see the shape of her mouth where she'd been screaming. The mass struck her. Her body shattered across the archive floor. Stone hit the concrete in pieces. One arm landed near my hand. The fingers were broken off at the knuckles. Her head struck a filing cabinet and split down the middle. I couldn't move. Clyde grabbed the back of my coat. "Jimmy, we go now." I know." He pulled me across the floor. My injured leg dragged behind me and left a red line on the concrete. Chloe was already crawling between the shelves. She found the lowest one at the back wall and pulled at something beneath it. "There," she said. "The door." It was a small metal hatch set into the floor behind the shelf. I hadn't seen it because the shelf was almost on top of it. Clyde shoved the shelf aside. It moved a few inches and then caught on the fallen cabinets. "Help me," he said. I put both hands against the bottom edge and pushed. My legs screamed every time I tried to use it, but the shelf shifted enough for Chloe to get through. She pulled the hatch open and crawled into the dark. Clyde took hold of my coat and dragged me after her. The mass tore through the archive behind us. Shelves went over one at a time. Steel bent and folders flew through the air. The stone pieces that had been Audrey struck the floor again as the tendrils pushed through them. I reached the hatch and pulled myself forward with both arms. My leg caught on the edge. The cut opened wider. Blood ran down my ankle and soaked into my shoe. Clyde grabbed me under the arms. "Hold still." "I am holding still." He pulled. I went through the opening and landed on the concrete passage below. It was narrow and smelled like dust, rust, and old water. Chloe crouched against the wall ahead of me, knees to her chest. Clyde climbed in after us. He turned around and shoved the hatch with both hands. It wouldn't close. The mass hit the shelf above. Metal screamed. The opening widened as the hatch bent upward. Clyde pushed harder. "Come on," he said. The gray tendrils reached through the gap. One slapped against the concrete beside my head. Its eye blinked and looked down at me. Clyde got one foot against the wall and forced the hatch down. The lid slammed shut. The lid sent dust sifting from the passage ceiling. Clyde kept both hands on it while the archive filled with the sound of crushing metal and breaking stone. Clyde kept both hands on the hatch until the noise above us began to fade. Not quiet. The archive was still coming apart up there, and the mass kept dragging itself over the metal, but the hatch stayed down. "Move," he said. I tried to stand. My injured leg folded before I got all the way up. The passage was too narrow to fall properly, so I hit the wall with my shoulder and slid down until I was sitting on the concrete. Clyde caught me by the back of my coat. "Don't use it." "I wasn't planning to." "Good." Chloe was already farther down the passage. She stood with her back to the wall and watched the hatch. Her hands were held close to her chest. She kept looking up at the ceiling too, like something might come through the pipes instead. The passage ran straight for a while and then opened into a concrete stairwell. There was a metal rail on one side and a light every few steps, most of them burned out. The stairs went down farther than I could see. Clyde helped me across the passage. I put my weight on my good leg and used the wall for balance. My right shin felt like somebody had driven a hot piece of metal through it. Blood had soaked my shoe and was spreading into the sole. I made it to the stairs. Then I stopped. "Sit," Clyde said. "I can keep going." "Sure. You can also bleed out while you're doing it." He lowered me onto the first step. Chloe stayed above us and watched the passage. Clyde pulled at the bottom of his sweatshirt. "Hold still." He tore a strip from it with both hands. The cloth made a long ripping sound that seemed too loud in the stairwell. He wrapped it around my leg above the wound and pulled tight. The pressure made my vision go white. "That's not helping," I said. "It's not supposed to help. It's supposed to keep you from leaving a trail." He tied the cloth and looked at the blood running around it. "Need another?" "I've got one," Chloe said. She came down 2 steps and held out a piece of fabric. It was torn from the shirt she wore under the oversized institute clothes. One edge was stained with old blood. Clyde took it without asking where she'd gotten it. "Thanks." Chloe went back up to the landing. Clyde wrapped the second strip around my shin. His hands weren't steady anymore. He tried to hide that by working faster, but I could see his fingers slipping against the cloth. "You should sit down too," I said. "I'm fine." "You've said that a lot." "Because people keep asking." He pulled the knot tight and sat back on the step below me. His breathing was rough. There was dust in his hair and a dark scrape along one side of his face. He looked at the passage. "She told me what this place is," he said. I looked toward Chloe. She was still watching the hatch. "What did she say?" Clyde rubbed both hands over his face. "The Institute isn't a school." I already knew that. We all knew it in pieces. The locked doors and the schedules and the medical rooms told us most of it, but knowing something was wrong wasn't the same as knowing what it was. Clyde continued. "They measure what we can do. That's the whole point. The tests, the appointments, the questions about memory. They put numbers on everything and keep the parts that work." "Useful results?" Chloe said from the landing. Her voice was small but clear enough in the stairwell. Clyde nodded. "Yeah, useful results." I thought about the medication cups lined up on the trays every morning. the white doors that locked from the outside, the staff asking what we'd forgotten after an ability test, not whether we'd been hurt. They kept us on the same schedule because it made us easier to measure. The doors stayed locked because we weren't supposed to leave before they were finished. "What happens when somebody stops being useful?" I asked. Clyde looked at me. "Chloe said they feed them to Subject Zero." He said it flatly. The thing in the archive had been Bailey, or some part of what Bailey had been. The Institute had put her in a room with that mass and called it a process. They'd watched through the glass and written down what happened. I looked at the bandage around my shin. The blood was already coming through. "The routine keeps us producing," I said. "Medication keeps people stable," Clyde said. "Stable means useful. Locked doors stay locked till they decide you aren't." Chloe came down another step. She didn't look at either of us. Subject Zero was a student. Clyde turned toward her. "You sure?" She nodded once. "They made him use his ability. Every day. They made him do it when he was tired. They made him do it when he couldn't remember how. He kept doing it anyway." "What ability?" I asked. Chloe's eyes went to the hatch again. "I don't know." "You said he couldn't stop." "He couldn't," she swallowed. "They kept making him use it until there wasn't anything else." The stairwell light above us flickered. Chloe flinched and pressed herself into the wall. "The gray is what's left," she said. Nobody said anything for a few seconds. There was a sound from the passage, not the scraping of the mass. Footsteps. Clyde stood up too fast and nearly fell. He caught the rail and pulled me behind him. Chloe moved down the stairs without being told. She pressed against my back and gripped my coat. The footsteps came closer. A man appeared at the top of the stairs. His white medical coat was clean, not dusty or torn. There wasn't any blood on it. He held a blue key card between two fingers. Ethan looked us over from the top of the stairs. "Clyde," he said. "Jimmy." Clyde put one hand against the rail. "Stay there." Ethan stopped. He looked at my leg, then at the strip of cloth tied around it. "You're injured." I noticed. "I can get you to the medical wing." "No." His face didn't change. Ethan was good at keeping his face still. He'd done it during intake when students cried and when staff came to take people away. He made everything sound like it had already been decided. "There isn't time to argue," he said. "Then don't." He looked past Clyde toward Chloe. She tightened her grip on my coat. Ethan took one step down. The blue card hung loose in his hand. "I can open the train gate beneath the Institute," he said. "I can lead you out through the service tunnel." The train gate. I hadn't known there was one beneath the Institute. I had no idea where the service tunnel led. But Ethan had been the only adult who talked to us during morning intake. He'd sat in the chair beside the examination table and asked questions in a calm voice while machines measured our pulse and memory. He'd explained the schedule. He told us when to sleep and when to report for testing. He'd acted like the locked doors were there to protect us. I wanted to believe him. That was the part I didn't trust. Clyde looked at the card. "Why help us?" Ethan took a moment before answering. "Because the Institute is no longer secure." That wasn't an answer. It was the kind of thing he said when he wanted to avoid giving one. "Are you coming or not?" he asked. Clyde glanced at me. Then he looked at Chloe. I tried to stand again. Clyde caught my arm and helped pull me upright. My leg shook under me. I put one hand on the rail and used the wall for support. Ethan waited while Clyde finished adjusting the cloth around my shin. When he was done, Ethan held out his hand toward Chloe. She didn't take it. "Come on," Ethan said. Chloe moved behind me instead. She kept one hand on the back of my coat and watched Ethan over my shoulder. He lowered his hand. "Stay close," he said. Clyde went first. I followed him down the stairs with my bad leg dragging behind me. Ethan walked below us with the blue keycard in his hand. Dr. Ethan Herrera led us toward the sub-level. The stairs turned at the next landing and opened onto a short concrete walkway. There was a steel door at the end of it with a blue card reader beside the frame. Ethan went past me and held up the key card. I expected to see a tunnel. The institute had a train gate beneath it. Ethan had said that himself. A service tunnel leading out was still possible, even though I had no idea where it went or how far we'd have to crawl to get there. Clyde reached the landing first. He put one hand on the concrete and waited for me. My leg had started bleeding through both strips of cloth. Every step sent a hot line up from my shin into my knee. Chloe stayed close behind me. Ethan swiped the card. The reader flashed green. The lock clicked and the door opened inward. No train tunnel opened on the other side. The room beyond was huge. It went back farther than the light from the stairwell could reach. Gray material lay across the floor and rose up the walls in thick, wet folds. It hung from the ceiling in ropes. Eyes opened and closed all through it. Some of them were small. Some were as large as my head. The smell came through the doorway a second later. Wet stone, old blood, and something sour underneath it. It was the same smell that had filled the room where they watched us before Bailey disappeared. Clyde looked into the room. Ethan. Ethan stepped to the side. He didn't look surprised. The gray material moved then. It surged over the concrete toward the open door. The material rolled over itself and pushed through the threshold in a thick wave. Clyde threw both hands out. He'd used his ability in the corridor. He'd shoved the filing cabinet aside, then held down the hatch. He was already pale and breathing hard, but he planted his feet anyway. The mass stopped. Not completely. It kept pressing forward. The gray folds piled up against something none of us could see. The concrete beneath Clyde's shoes cracked in thin lines. "Back up," Clyde said. I tried to move Chloe behind me. My bad leg folded and I caught myself on the wall. "Move," Clyde said again. He was talking to me this time. I pulled Chloe back as far as I could. Ethan stayed beside the door with the blue key card hanging from his hand. He wasn't trying to help Clyde. He wasn't even looking at the mass. Clyde grunted and pushed harder. The gray material drew back a few inches. It made a wet, dragging sound as it crossed the concrete. The eyes in the doorway rolled toward him. There were too many of them to count. Clyde advanced a step. His knees shook. "Come on," he said. The mass pushed back. Clyde's shoes slid across the concrete. He leaned into it with his shoulders and kept both arms out. The tendons in his neck stood out. His hands were trembling so badly his fingers looked loose. I knew what it cost him. He'd told me he wasn't tired. He was just out of room. The door started to swing shut behind the mass. Clyde saw it. He pushed again, trying to force the gray material back far enough for the door to close. For 1 second it worked. The wave pulled away from the threshold and the steel door moved another few inches. Then something came out of the room. It was thinner than the rest of the mass. A tendril, maybe. It moved too fast for me to follow. It went through Clyde's chest. The gray point came out between his shoulder blades. At first, only a little blood came out. Just a dark spot spreading across the front of his sweatshirt. Clyde lowered his eyes to it. His arms dropped. The pressure in the doorway disappeared. The mass surged forward and the door slammed back into the wall. Clyde fell backward onto the landing. He hit hard and slid a few inches. The tendril pulled free from his chest and disappeared back into the room. I tried to get to him. My leg wouldn't hold me. I dropped to one knee and caught myself with both hands. Chloe made a small sound behind me and seized my coat. "Clyde." He was lying on his side. His eyes were open, but he wasn't looking at me. Blood ran down the front of his sweatshirt and collected beneath his ribs. I crawled toward him. Ethan stood between me and the doorway. Not directly in front of me, just far enough to one side that he could watch what happened without getting touched. The material filled the open doorway. It crowded the frame and spilled over the bottom edge onto the landing. The tendrils moved slowly now. It didn't need to hurry. Clyde's fingers twitched against the concrete. His ability had stopped. He wasn't holding the mass back anymore. He couldn't. Whatever force he'd been using had gone out of him when the tendril entered his chest. The door stayed open. Ethan looked at me. "You test highest, Jimmy," he said. "It wants you last." I stared at him. For a second, I couldn't make the words mean anything. They were too calm. Ethan said them the way he talked about schedules and test results, like he was giving me information I needed to use. Then I looked back at the stairs. The locked doors, the medical wing, the archive, the hatch. The way Ethan had appeared below us without dust on his coat. He hadn't escaped the attack by luck. He'd known where to go. He'd known where the stairs led. He'd sent us down here. "You're feeding us to it," I said. Ethan didn't answer right away. He watched the mass behind him and then looked at Clyde. Clyde was not the final result. I felt something cold move through me that had nothing to do with the concrete floor. Bailey hadn't been taken by accident. The students in the Institute's medical section hadn't been caught in some random failure. The Institute had been moving us toward this room, one at a time. The thing in the room wasn't just a creature they kept locked away. It was what happened when a student used an ability past the point where a body could safely hold it. They'd pushed somebody until the person was gone. The gray was what remained. I knew the warning because they'd given it to me too. Every test ended with the same instructions. Stop when the pressure starts. Don't continue through the pain. Don't abandon the limit. They'd told me what could happen if I went too far. They just hadn't told me they'd already made it happen to somebody else. Chloe pulled harder on my coat. "Jimmy," she whispered. Ethan stepped farther aside. The mass rolled over the threshold. Its folds filled the doorway from floor to ceiling. An eye opened near the center and turned toward Clyde. Clyde was still on the landing with the gray tendril through his chest. One eye opened near the center and fixed on Clyde. Clyde remained on the landing with the gray tendril through his chest. I reached for Ethan. It wasn't like reaching with my hands. There was no movement in the air and nothing came loose from me that anyone else could see. I found the edge of his mind the same way I'd found every other mind. A pressure behind the eyes. A place where somebody's thoughts stopped being private. I usually kept it small. 30 seconds was the limit. I could erase the last 30 seconds from somebody's memory if I concentrated and stopped when the pressure started. That was the rule they'd given me during testing. It was also the rule I'd made for myself after I learned what happened when I ignored it. For 2 years, I'd stayed inside that limit. Ethan stood right in front of me with the blue keycard in his hand. He'd taken us down the stairs. He'd opened the door. He'd stood aside and watched Clyde get pierced through the chest. I didn't erase the last 30 seconds. I kept going. The pressure built behind my eyes until a screwdriver seemed to drive through both sides of my head. Ethan's face stayed calm for another second. Then his mouth opened. He lowered his eyes to the keycard as if he'd forgotten what it was for. His eyes moved across the landing. He saw Clyde. He saw me. He saw Chloe. Then those things stopped meaning anything. Ethan's knees gave out. He dropped beside the rail and landed on one shoulder. The keycard slipped from his hand and struck the concrete. It made a faint plastic sound. He didn't reach for it. He didn't look at me anymore. He wasn't looking at anything. His face was empty in a way I'd never seen before, even from the staff who came to take people away. Ethan had no fear and no plan left in him. He had no idea where he was or why he was there. I kept pulling. There were too many memories inside him, years of them, rooms and faces and schedules, names on files, numbers written beside our names, medical trays, locked doors, the observation room, the first time he'd seen the gray stuff move. I didn't choose any of it. I took all of it. The pressure passed through him and moved into the room behind him. It went under the door first. Gray folds had piled up against the threshold, wet material pushing out onto the landing. The erasure touched the nearest part of it and kept spreading. The mass stopped moving. Not all at once. One tendril went still while the others kept sliding forward. An eye near the bottom of the doorway blinked twice and then stayed open. Another eye closed, then another. The gray folds shuddered. I could feel something in there. Not thoughts the way Ethan had thoughts. Not memories laid out in a line. It was more like pressure stored inside a body that had been forced to hold it too long. There were pieces of a person buried in it. A room, a light, hands holding something down, a voice telling it to continue. The thing had been a student once. The memories weren't clear enough to show me who. They came apart as soon as I touched them. I got a flash of a face, and then nothing. A bed with straps across it. A white wall. Someone being told to use the ability again. Then the eyes went blank. Every one of them. The mass lost its shape. The tendrils slid down the doorframe and spread over the floor. Gray material sloughed out of the containment room in thick, wet pieces. It made a sound like mud falling from a shovel. The pressure in my head got worse. I tried to stop. I couldn't. The erasure had reached too far. It wasn't something I could pull back once it crossed the threshold. I felt it moving through the room and out toward Chloe. She was behind me. Her hand was still hooked into my coat. I turned and tried to push her away. "Chloe." She looked up at me. The erasure passed through her before I could move her out of reach. Her fingers loosened. She looked at my face for a second, then at her own hands. She turned them over slowly, as if she'd never seen them before. She didn't remember her name. I could see it happen. The little things left her first. The institute, the stairs, the warning she'd given us about Subject Zero. Then the bigger things went with them. Her room, the adults who had hurt her, the reason she'd been hiding, the fact that she was 6 years old. She didn't cry. She just stood there with both hands at her sides. I reached toward her. She stepped back. That hurt worse than I expected. I understood why she did it, though. I was a stranger to her now. Maybe not even that. A stranger at least had a shape. I was just the person standing closest when the world went away. The pressure kept moving. I tried to hold it inside myself. I tried to close whatever part of me had opened. The 30-second limit had always been a line I could feel. It was like a door in my head. When the pressure reached that point, I stopped and let the memory go. This time there was no door. I felt Clyde before I saw him. His blood was warm where it touched the concrete. His fingers moved once near his side. His eyes were still open, but there was no focus in them. I crawled toward him. The erasure reached me then. My memories started breaking apart. The archive came first. Filing cabinets. Audrey under the vent. The stone spreading over her arm. Her body shattered on the floor. I knew those things had happened, but they stopped belonging to me. Then the medical wing. Bailey's foot moving under the gray stuff. The locked doors. The medication cups. The questions they asked us every morning. I tried to keep him. I held on to the sound of him counting under his breath. 1, 2. The way his hands shook when he pulled the cabinet off my leg. The way he'd said he was fine, even though he wasn't. Those memories went next. I grabbed at them, but there wasn't anything to grab. They slipped through me like water. Chloe was standing by the wall. Her face was empty now. She didn't know me. She didn't know herself. Ethan lay beside the rail with his eyes open and his mind gone. Gray sludge spread beneath the containment room door and covered the concrete in a thin, shining layer. Clyde was lying on the landing. Then I lost the reason I was there. Then I lost the place. Then I lost my own name. Jimmy Henderson's last clear memory is Clyde Carter lying on the landing as gray sludge spreads beneath the containment room door. The last clear thing Jimmy Henderson remembered was Clyde Carter on the landing, gray sludge spreading beneath the containment room door. After that, there was nothing. I woke up with snow on my face. It wasn't much snow, just a thin layer that had melted around my nose and mouth. The rest of it sat cold against my coat. I lay there for a while, looking up through the trees. The branches were dark and heavy with white. Ponderosa pine, I think. I knew that much from the bark and the smell, though I couldn't say how. My right leg hurt. I pushed myself up on both hands and examined it. The shin had healed wrong. The bone made a bend where it shouldn't, and my foot pointed out when I tried to put weight on it. The skin was closed over the injury, but there was a thick, crooked ridge beneath it. I stood anyway. There was a girl lying beside me in the snow. She was small and thin and wore clothes that didn't fit her. The shirt hung down past her hands. Dried blood marked the shirt, though I couldn't tell if it was hers. Her hair was tangled and wet at the ends. She watched me stand. "Come on," I said. She didn't move. I stepped forward and nearly fell. My right leg buckled, and I caught myself against a tree. The bark scraped my palm. The girl got up then and followed me. I had no idea where we were going. I couldn't remember how we'd gotten there. I couldn't tell how long we'd been lying in the snow. The sun was still low. It made the snow blue between the trees. I glanced behind us. There was no road, no fence, no guard station or gravel or lights. Just the forest running up the hill behind us. The Cascade Institute was somewhere back there. I knew that name. I recognized the name, but not where it came from. I had no sense whether I'd been there yesterday or spent my whole life there. I only knew that the thought of going back made my stomach tighten. The girl walked right behind me. "What is your name?" I asked. She looked at me. "I don't know." Her voice was small and scratchy. She said it like she expected somebody to get angry about it. I turned toward her. "Do you know mine?" She shook her head. Mine was gone too. There was a name sitting in the back of my mind. Jimmy. It felt like it belonged to me, though I couldn't say why. Henderson was there too, but it was farther away. Like something written on paper I'd seen once and then thrown out. "Chloe," I said. She stared at me. I couldn't tell if that was her name or just the first word that came up. It felt more certain than the rest of the things in my head. "Is that me?" she asked. "I think so." She lowered her eyes to her hands. They were red from the cold and dirty around the fingernails. "Was I at the Institute?" "I don't know." That was the answer to most things. We started walking. The snow came up over my shoes. Every step with my right leg hurt, but the pain was useful. It gave me something that stayed the same. Put the foot down, shift the weight, keep moving. I had no memory of leaving the Institute. No memory of crossing the grounds or getting through the guarded road. I didn't remember the forest. I didn't remember carrying Chloe or following her or her following me. I didn't remember any of the weeks between the sub-level and that morning. They had to be there. My coat was stiff with dirt and dried blood. I put my hands in the pockets because they were cold. Something hard pressed against my fingers. I pulled it out. It was a small bone. Maybe from a mouse. Maybe from something bigger. It was chewed at one end. The other end was smooth and pale. I held it close to my face. There was a taste in my mouth. Old meat and dirt. Something bitter that seemed to be stuck behind my teeth. I checked the other pocket. There were 2 more bones in it. I stood still while the snow landed on my sleeves. Chloe stopped a few steps ahead and looked back at me. "What is it?" "I don't know." I found more in the inside pocket of my coat, small ones. A piece of jaw with 2 teeth still in it. A thin rib. Something that might have been part of a foot. There wasn't anything else. No card, no paper, no key. Nothing that told me who we were or where we belonged. Just bones. I dropped them into the snow. A few minutes later, I found another one on the ground. Then another. They were half buried along the path we were making through the trees. Some had teeth marks in them. Some were clean. The hunger came back when I saw them. It was a deep, empty feeling under my ribs. Not the kind you get when you miss breakfast. This was worse. My body felt weak and hollow. My hands shook when I tried to button my coat. I knew what had happened. I'd eaten them. Maybe there hadn't been anything else. Maybe we'd been out there for days with no food and no place to go. I could picture none of it, but the bones in my pockets and the taste in my mouth were enough. I had eaten whatever I could find to stay alive. Chloe hadn't said anything about it. She kept walking behind me with her arms folded tight against her body. After a while, she asked, "Are we going back?" "No." "Where are we going?" "I don't know." She thought about that. "Then why are you walking?" I faced the trees ahead. They went down into a darker part of the forest. The snow was thicker there and the ground sloped away. "I don't know that either." She kept following me. I remembered one other thing. Not a place. Not a face. Not a word spoken out loud. I had emptied Chloe's mind. I knew it had been the only way out. The knowledge sat inside me without the memory around it. There was no picture of her before. No reason I could hold in my hands. Just the fact that I'd taken everything from her so we could escape. She walked because I walked. She stopped when I stopped. When I turned left, she turned left too. She had no idea who she was, and I had done that to her. "I'm sorry," I said. She looked at me. "For what?" I paused. I had no way to explain it. "I don't know." She accepted that. Chloe didn't ask more questions. The snow kept falling. It gathered on the branches and broke loose in soft lumps whenever the wind moved through. There was no sound from the institute. No alarms. No speakers. No locked doors opening somewhere behind us. I couldn't see it anymore. That didn't mean it wasn't there. The forest was thick and the hill hid everything beyond it. But the farther we went, the less I felt that pull in my chest. The place became something behind us instead of something waiting ahead. My leg dragged through the snow. The bend in it made walking slow and awkward. I had to plant the heel first and swing the foot around. Chloe matched my pace without being asked. She was quiet enough that sometimes I forgot she was there until I heard her shoes behind me. I couldn't tell how long we'd been walking. The morning had brightened, but the sun was still hidden behind the trees. Ahead of us, the forest opened a little. More pines stood beyond it, their trunks straight and dark against the snow. There was no road there, no sign telling us where to go. I stepped into the deeper woods. Chloe followed. I kept moving on the crooked leg, with the taste of old meat still in my mouth and the Cascade Institute somewhere behind us. I had no memory of who I had been. Chloe didn't know who she was. Neither of us could remember the way out. So I led her deeper into the Idaho forest.